Okay, now thank you so much, Ms. Martile. I think I was just started by just doing a synopsis of the Black Management Forum before I can do a proper introduction just to allow other participants to join in. Well, the Black Management Forum as a non-political and non-sexist organization focusing on the development of managerial leadership and the creation of managerial structures that are reflective of the demographics and values of the broader South Africa, African societies rather. Strong attention is paid to socio-economic transformation of our country through the pursuit of justice, fairness, and equity. The Black Management has been in existence for 45 years. It is a thought leadership organization with the main purpose of influencing socio-economic transformation in our country in pursuit of socio-economic justice, fairness, and equity. The Black Management stands for the development and empowerment of managerial leadership and the creation of managerial structures and processes that reflect the demographics and values of the wider society. Black Management Forum Northwest, in pursuit of its mission of influencing socio-economic transformation in a country, socio-economic justice, fairness, and equity. Well, thank you so much for your patience, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to inaugural Madam Chair's leadership event. We are still in full force, celebrating Women's Month. We celebrate the strength and resilience of women and their contribution to society and the country. And today's theme is elections, women, leadership, and the impact witnessed in women-led organizations. This event is aiming at shining light on elections, the dynamics that occur during elections in general, difference of male and female candidates, how organizations in their province fare in terms of employment equity, and evaluating the impact that female leadership has influenced in organizations in the province. Ladies and gentlemen, if all my positions were taken away from me with one exception, then definitely I will choose to keep this kind of engagement for Barrett. I will regain all the rest of my positions. My name is Refilwe Sokobazani, Black Management Forum Student Chapter Northwest, and it gives me great pleasure to facilitate the event, particularly on this month. And this year's Women's Month is under the theme, Generational Equality. Realizing women's rights for an equal future, the concept of generation equality is a global campaign and the links South Africa to global efforts to achieve gender equality by 2030. And we are in 2021. I'm sure we are like 9 years. It seems like a long time, and it's not. Let us continue to put hands together, thrive together. We need each other more than ever as women in this country. Dr. Dumelen Kletiba, I need you. Ms. Tasneem Fredericks, I need you. Ms. Elizabeth Mugua, I need you. We need each other. Our distinguished panelists, our participants in the Northwest Province and other provinces, welcome to inaugural Madam Chair leadership event. We are going to have so much fun. We are going to walk out here as different empowered women. And as you know, an empowered woman empower other women. So welcome and thank you very much for this opportunity. Well, the secondary objectives of this Madam Chair's leadership event is to be the Black Management Forum Northwest annual Madam Chair's leadership event that focuses on driving significant debate around matters of socio-economic transformation in addressing gender parity, ethical leadership, inter alia with empathetic leadership and governance, to discuss with panelists the changes they brought to the table and give recognition to those leaders who have done a stellar job. We want to discuss the challenges that women leaders face and how can mentorship help get over them. We want to ignite the culture of servant leadership and active citizenship in the province, particularly in government institutions in pursuit of socio-economic justice, fairness, and equity. for all. We want to create thought leadership, dialogue platform that brings together the society and civic leadership together with senior government officials and prominent business leaders to engage and network. We'll also love to acknowledge the following stakeholders, which is the Black Management Forum National, the Black Management Forum Northwest, NAHAU Northwest, IEC Northwest, and now finally we are getting into it. Let me introduce our distinguished panelists for this evening. We have Dr. Dumelentle Tiba. She's a provincial electoral officer in the Northwest Province. We have Advocate Tasneem Fredericks. She's a Black Management Forum Deputy President and Head of Black Management Forum Gender Desk. She's a social entrepreneur, transformation activist, and advocate for women empowerment. We have Ms. Elizabeth Mugua. She's a provincial chairperson of the National Union of Health, Education, and Allied Workers Union, which is NAHAU in the Northwest. And we have Mrs. Batile Zie as our moderator. She's our provincial chairperson in the Northwest Province. Well, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence. We are so honored to have you as our guest speakers for this evening. And without any waste of time, in our youthful language, we say, it's gonna get lit. Let us listen, let us learn, let us engage. Dr. Dumelentle Tiba, the podium is yours, ma'am. Thank you.
Maybe we could take Dr. Ms. It's not a Ms. Tasneem Fredericks, DP,
oh, yes,
as I affectionately call her.
Thanks,
she
Barbara.
is in our province. She is the deputy president of the Black Management Forum. I think we could start with her until the ladies in our province finally join in, because that's what they're struggling to join in. It's just connectivity. Thank you for now, ma'am.
All right, thank you so much, Ms. Batile. I think we can hand over to our deputy president, advocate.
Thank you, Refilwe. I'm actually just a lowly attorney, specializing in property law, actually. So thank you so much. I acknowledge the leadership. My colleague on the board, Ms. Batiletsi, the distinguished panelists that are on the panel this evening from the IEC, and May Elizabeth, as well as the audience this evening who have made the time, to join this session. So thank you very much. I'm honored by the invitation. And I'd just like to say thank you for that. So specifically on my topic, I was asked to speak around the issue, because I have a legal background, the implementation of employment equity. Is it an aborted dream? It was a heading, or rather topic, that almost had a given conclusion. And I think it wasn't concluded incorrectly or prematurely. If you look, at August, March is International Women's Day, and then August is, the 9th of August is South African Women's Day. And that is really, because on the 9th of August, 1956, 20,000 women marched to the union buildings against the extension of past laws to women. So we can see that going back to 1956, there was this literal movement of women activists who were standing up for women's rights, and saying women must have more freedom to move. And I think when one looks at 1956 versus 2021, and as women, Black women in particular, who experienced triple oppression, we have to ask ourselves, are we now facing figurative past laws? Because we have all of this beautiful legislation, we have all of these freedoms, but yet we are still not free, truly, in terms of the spaces that we occupy on leadership levels. So the purpose of that march in 1956, it's a milestone. We recognize it, we celebrate it, and we applaud it. So we see all of those women, we hear what those women wanted, and we see how they rebelled against this patriarchal system that was used to control women and reduce them to submissive beings who largely are at the mercy of men. So we often frame women as primary caregivers who need male protection. And I think it's important that we move away from that kind of thinking, despite the fact that we are mostly in this country primary caregivers, into a role that sees us as equal human beings. To me, as a woman in South Africa, when we look at the amount of abuse that women endure, if we look at the amount of, the rise in femicide, gender-based violence, the spike in teenage pregnancies, all of this, when you look at it holistically, it really subjugates women and it causes women to become, victims in the cyclical, structural oppression of poverty. And a lot of women who are in abusive relationships are not there by choice, but it's because they have nowhere else to go. They don't have another place that they can go and rent for themselves and their children. So they rely, on being provided with shelter from an abusive spouse or an abusive partner. So, there's a lot of that we need to take into account. And when we look at employment equity, I mean, what we're largely speaking about is the upward mobility of women. And when we talk about the upward mobility of women, we automatically assume that the financial, that the financial reward or the financial compensation in terms of salaries will match that promotion. But even in that sphere, there's a lot of, we know that, globally, there's a gender pay gap. I know that the theme this year, and South Africa also participates in this global movement towards gender equality. And the theme is generation equality, realizing women's right for an equal future. So there's this constant comparison with women and inequality, women and poverty. The feminization, especially now during COVID, of poverty, unemployment, and inequality being the face of a Black woman in particular. So I think when we look at the employment equity and how it's failed us, we also need to say that there are, and I'm one of the Black women who benefited from employment equity. So we should not discount the value of the legislative framework, because I think that if we were to leave it to civil society and corporate South Africa and government, if we were to say, well, let us not have this plethora of legislation and policies, then clearly there would be even less movement than what there currently is. So it's quite important that we constantly revise and look at employment equity legislation. And we acknowledge that while there are definite failures that are measurable in terms of Stats South Africa, in terms of the Commission on Employment Equity, because companies as well as government must report into labor in terms of what they pay women as to what, they must say what they pay generally on the form. They must also say, in what spaces Black women occupy within that structure or institution or corporation. So those are statistical information that gets fed into via report. And if you're a designated employee in terms of the Labor Relations Act, you have to give that information to the Department of Labor. The problem with the Employment Equity Act is that, 22 years later, the Employment Equity Act is legislation that was passed in 1998. So when you look back 22 years ago and you say, well, Have we improved in the private sector? Have we improved in government? Have we improved in the political arena? And I think our government, in terms of the ruling party, has been very progressive in terms of women representation in cabinet, women representation in parliament, and really striving for that gender parity in the political sphere. Outside of the political sphere, I don't think the picture is all that bright or all that clear, all that rosy. I think that a lot of work definitely needs to go into, how do we continue to be deliberate about the advancement of women in corporate, in universities, in government, and also, how do we bring the informal and rural community, closer to the table so that everybody, and I think this is one of the criticisms that I must agree with broad-based, with Black economic empowerment is the fact that it has not been as broad-based as we would have liked it to have been as Black people, simply because it has not affected as many Black people as it should. So while it's created the sprinkle of Black elitists, which, it's not a problem, because we don't ever speak about how apartheid empowered and made many white South Africans, grossly wealthy, to the point where, it has created generational wealth. We never talk about that, but when there are a few, Black wealthy people, there's a lot of criticism against them, and employment equity and broad-based Black economic empowerment gets used against those beneficiaries as saying, oh, but it only benefits a few, whilst apartheid was built foundationally to benefit a few. So I think it's important that, when we make this criticism, that we don't become too critical and deflect the problem and make it only about us. We should be happy for those Black people who have benefited from broad-based Black economic empowerment. The issue is, what have they done in turn to empower other Black people, other Black businesses, other Black women? Are they sponsoring Black women to get into the boardroom space at top senior management? So the issue in South Africa is that we do not have enough Black women, specifically Black African women, at the leadership position. And we need to untangle and understand why this is the case. And for me, the Employment Equity Act, as I said earlier, implemented in 1998, 22 years later, almost zero impact, almost zero advancement. And you have to ask yourself why. And I think part of the reason is that we've left this largely to corporate South African government to embrace themselves organically. So they had to set their own targets, which is a bad thing, because clearly they are doing as little as what they possibly can. It's become largely a tick box exercise where, people scramble around this time of the year when it's annual report and end of financial year and the submission of, the forms that must go to the Department of Labor. And it becomes, let's stick this quickly. Let's do a quick women's program so that we can score 5 points. And the point that I'm trying to make is that if that is how we're going to achieve it, and we're not going to have people buying into this compact of transformation, then at least it's a start. It's better than nothing. And I think that if the Employment Equity Act can definitely, and certainly, and part of the purpose of legislation is that it's never, it's never cemented, it's never cast in stone. It's evolutionary. It must change. So if it's not working after 22 years, we then, as BMF specifically, need to lobby government and parliament and say, well, why are penalties not being implemented for that? Because maybe we need a stick approach and a stick and carrot approach. So companies that and government departments and communities that are running the even communities, because there are big NPCs in South Africa that also need to fulfill the requirements of the Employment Equity Act. We need to say, well, how do we reward those people who embrace transformation? And then how do we penalize those who don't? Because unless you have that, it's not going to happen because we've waited 22 years and we've given people enough opportunity and time and benefit to say, well, you do this on your own, and we've seen that they have failed miserably in terms of that requirement. So I think access to education is also quite important, and it has improved statistically according to Stats SA. But if you look at the levels of unemployment that's come out for the last quarter, I mean, the statistics are quite shocking, and it's quite scary, to be honest. And I must be honest with you in terms of, I don't know how people sleep at night. I don't know how our leaders sleep at night, knowing that, you know, if you, for example, you know, out of the 7,800,000 unemployed people in June 2021, that 60% of that number of unemployed people are between the ages of 15 and 34. That is like people who are able to work but are not employed. So I think it's important to also link the unemployment rate with employment equity, and how we facilitate and really stimulate the economy in ways that are innovative, that cater to all Black people in South Africa, but particularly women. As I mentioned earlier, because of the triple oppression that women experience, special interventions for women, for Black women, are needed. And this comes from the highest office in the country. President Ramaphosa has spoken on various platforms about the intervention for Black women. He made an announcement last year on Women's Day that 40% of government procurement will be going to Black businesses. Now, you know, it's all good and well to make these announcements and be sensationalistic over Women's Day or Women's Month. But, you know, we also need to then hold our government accountable in terms of, you know, how does that 40% procurement translate in real terms? How are municipalities implementing that 40% procurement of Black women-owned businesses? How is, you know, other departments ensuring that they have, you know, processes in place to support women-owned businesses so that they can procure from them? So, you know, it's a lot of issues. And then when we go back to the unemployment rate, you know, amongst Black African women for the period June 2021, the previous quarter, 41% of Black African women unemployed. And I was listening to an interesting webinar by Sisbusi Mavuso the other evening, when I think it was Midrand Branch who had an event. And she was saying, and I thought this was actually so profound, it was so powerful, because she's saying that poor women give birth to poor children. And the poverty that she was referring to, she went on to explain, was not just poverty in terms of no money for food, but it was poverty of education, because women are the first institutions of learning for young children. You know, children learn from sitting on their mother's laps. There's going to be poverty of culture. There's going to be poverty of wisdom, poverty of experience, poverty of just general well-being. So we need to ensure, in a society where we know most of the children in South Africa are fatherless, they don't even know who their fathers are. I mean, often you'll see advertisements from the Department of Social Development not being able to issue unabridged birth certificates because they need that information. I mean, these are what I see as invisible barriers to block women even further than what they are. So this issue of you know, women being disadvantaged and being prejudiced, it's systemic, it's cultural. Patriarchy is cultural. It's hundreds of years old, and all men, regardless of race, are beneficiaries of patriarchy. So we need men who occupy these powerful spaces to be allies to women. And I mean, gender mainstreaming is not just about women. So when you talk about women's rights, it's not because you want to alienate or exclude men. Men are part of the conversation, but they're not going to lead the conversation. And I think it's important to make that distinction so that we all know that had we left transformation or the liberation of South Africa in the hands of white people, none of us would have been liberated today. So that struggle for the emancipation of Black people needed to be led by Black people. So similarly, the emancipation of women and the woman agenda needs to be led by women. And I have grave difficulty with women who even don't see that they should be the ones who lead the woman agenda, the woman transformation. It's got to be led by us. There must be nothing about us without us. I mean, it's as simple as that. Program director, how much time do I have left? Because I am mindful that I only have 20 minutes and I don't want to go over my time. Do you feel where?
DP, I'll abuse my powers.
Pardon?
I'll abuse my powers. It's Women's Month. I guess this time one can carry on. I think you're touching on quite a few things that really need to be touched on, especially when you speak about a woman's agenda should be proposed and propelled by women. And especially when you speak about the fact that when we speak of women leadership, it should be something that us as women, we should be the ones who are, pro it, talking about it, putting it on the agenda. Nobody's gonna come and save us and actually put it on the agenda unless we put it on the agenda. Hence the conversation tonight. How do we as women, you spoke about poverty, generational poverty, and that poverty, it also translates to the poverty of the voice, because quite a lot of women are left at home when it's election time. They cannot even go and elect because they're primary caretakers. Some of them are not even aware of, the importance of their vote. To them, a vote is just a vote. They don't know that them going there and putting an X on that paper, it's what is going to give them social grants at some point. It's what's going to actually make sure that when internships, when learnerships, and all those things are done, a woman, there is an employment equity is actually, implemented. Hence, I'm saying it's time we spoke about the implementation of employment equity. Is it an aborted dream, or is it because us as women, we are not the ones propelling it? We are not the ones taking care of it. Because even in government, I can tell you that in government, you will find that there are employment equity committees. When employment and posts have to be filled, you hardly find those employment equity committees actually being active. So if you can, please go a bit further on that, and how can we marry it? Because I mean, we could say corporate South Africa is not doing it, but what are we also doing on the ground? Because at the end of the day, even the political parties that are there are run by branches, and branches are somewhere there, your ward, your all that. How are women really even active in those? That's just where I'm saying let's put more emphasis on it before the program director says you have enough time or you've had your time.
Exactly.
Thanks, thanks, Bati and the program director for giving me a few extra minutes. So the employment equity, like I said, is legislation that exists since 1998. Now, what the Employment Equity Act lacks is the penalties and the targets for the implementation for the advancement. So corporates don't have to be as deliberate. They don't have to be committed to transformation because there are no penalties attached to that in terms of the Employment Equity Act. And I think that, what we need to do is look at, because we have the legislation and companies are tick boxing to the minimum. So if you look at Nordic and Scandinavian models, countries like Belgium, where they enforced women representation on boards. In fact, 50% of women representation on boards. And they've successfully been able to do that through a quota system. So our Employment Equity Act doesn't also speak about quotas and set-asides, because we are competing with a constitution, that doesn't allow us, this first world constitution that doesn't really cater for a situation, a unique situation of apartheid. I mean, we do have justifiable limitations, and I mean, just the notion as an attorney on a legal basis, you don't get laws to protect the majority of people. So anywhere else in the world that you go, if you go to America, the white people are the majority. So they have affirmative action for African Americans, for Latin Americans. That is what their affirmative action protects: minority rights. So we then have to, in our own mind, say to ourselves, well, if we're the demographic majority and we have these laws, then we must be the economic minority, because why else would we have laws to protect us? So I think that quota system is not present in the Employment Equity Act. And that is something that we must introduce through, and how Belgium, for example, used it was, in Belgium, if you wanted to start a company and you went to their SIP-C, where you register companies, if you did not have 50% women directors for that company that you wanted to start, or if you had a company, they would give you a period within which to comply. They would just not register your company. So imagine all of a sudden, companies now know that if they don't implement 50% Black women on their boards, okay, because let's talk about, the inequality within the equality. So we accept Black African women are the most vulnerable, are the most marginalized, followed by colored women, and then lastly, Indian women. So for me, in that equation of Blackness, there are no white women that have been marginalized and prejudiced, especially if you think about how white women perpetuated and benefited from apartheid. So to me, that, I can't reconcile when we say women, it's very difficult. I think we need to be deliberate, and what the president of the country has said in terms of triple oppression, it's Black women. It's not all women. So if we have those kind of measures in place, Bati, practical steps that may not be related to the Employment Equity Act, because remember, we don't only have employment equity for women. We have a lot of legislation that speaks to the advancement of Black people in general. And employment equity doesn't speak specifically to women. So while we can have more legislation, and I know there was a Women Empowerment Gender Act or bill that was passed, and this was in 2014. That bill, and yeah, it was called the Women Empowerment and Gender Equality Bill, and that bill spoke about the 50% quota that needed to be achieved for companies and institutions, etc. So the bill was adopted, but then that was in 2014. We're now in 2021. There was a lot of criticism around getting more legislation, and I'm saying the legislation that we currently have don't speak specifically to 50% representation, because the minister then makes regulations. So if we as BMF go back to government and parliament and lobby for the passing of the Women Empowerment and Gender Equality Bill into an act, like we did with the national minimum wage, by the way, because BMF participated in that discussion, and we made representations in at Parliament. I mean, I worked very closely under BBC, and with BUSA and the Department of Labor, and our argument was always in favor of a national minimum wage, and that took 3 years to come into, it was a culmination of 3 years of work. So I'm saying the Women Empowerment and Gender Equality Bill was adopted as a bill in 2014. We're now in 2021, and that bill has been shelved. Okay, nobody's talking about it. People were unhappy about it. There were critics who were saying, yeah, but we keep having more and more and more legislation. And I'm saying, so what? So what if we have more legislation? So what if it's a repetition? It seems to me that people in this country need to be reminded with more and more legislation, because it seems to be the only thing, the minimum thing that they are willing to comply with. So the quota in terms of 50% representation on boards, if we can resuscitate that bill, if we can, lobby the Department of Trade and Industry to say, how does the minister regulate this? How does this 40% procurement get regulated that the president of the country has announced on? So, I mean, in conclusion, and to agree with you, it is an aborted dream simply because there's been movement, and then there's been stagnation. And now in 2021, what we're actually seeing is a reversal of transformation, which for me is very scary. It's very worrisome because now we're going backward. So instead of going forward, or at least, being constant, staying on the same place because of COVID and because we are in a post-COVID economy, we are going to go all the way back, to 1956. So we just need to be careful around how we navigate these spaces and how active we are, because we may not see the fruits of our labor, and that is fine, but we want to ensure that these are not conversations. The BMFs, my grandchildren can't be sitting on webinars talking about these issues, because then I would have failed them personally. Do you know what I'm saying, Bati? And so I think we need to start working on how, because I mean, in terms of the Sustainable Development Goal, there's a date of 2030. Now you can't move that date, but at least aspire towards that date. What are we as South Africans saying? When are we going to reach gender parity in this country? Is it going to be 2030 for us as well? We're in 2021. We last had a bill speaking to these issues in 2014. It's been shelved. Nothing's been done about it. We now need to say, well, it's 2021, maybe by 2022, 23, 24, this bill becomes an act, and then government, or maybe we don't need the bill to become an act immediately, but minister can make regulations. So yeah, I hope I've answered and spoken enough about what you've asked me to.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Fredericks. I think you've just highlighted the most important issues, also the history of 9 August 1956, which is quite interesting, as the aim of the march was really for the protection and of the introduction of apartheid pass laws for Black women, the employment equity, to achieve equity in the workplace by promoting equal opportunities and fair treatment in employment. Also, the challenges, problems of Employment Equity Act, the challenges Black women face in leadership positions. Well, thank you so much. That is so profound. And I can see that Dr. Tumelendle Tiba is joining us. Dr. Tiba, are you with us? Also, let me welcome May Elizabeth Mukua. I can also see that she just joined us. Dr. Tiba.
Good evening, ladies. I was actually with you all along on my phone. And the reason that I did not respond will be part of my presentation. As you correctly say, my surname is Tiba, so I'm Dr. Tiba, not Dr. Tumelendle. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you. The podium is yours, Dr. Tiba.
Thank you. Are we going to share the presentation? I did send it earlier. Are we able to share it?
I think the host will let you share the presentation, Dr. Tiba.
Okay, I don't know if you, while I was switching from my phone to the laptop, we changed the presentation schedule because Ms. Mukua was supposed to go before me, but that's fine. Let's continue. I'm sure BMF will share the presentation with us. I tried to recreate the title to read Elections, Female Leadership, and the Impact in Female-Led Organizations. And I'd like to start by saying straight away that for me, female leadership is actually tautology. Because, thank you very much. Because in my opinion, not only because I am from a matrilineal side of my maternal family, but in my opinion, women always are leaders. So to call them, to qualify them, it's like, in my opinion, it's like saying Black African. I don't see why we need to do tautology unless we have a political reason for doing that. But as I was saying, for me, women are leaders, period. They are queens and kings. They are monarchs of what they survey. And what they survey in William Cooper's allusion to that poem that was supposed to have been written by a man who was stranded on an island. For me, women survey us from the minute that we are born to the minute that they depart or we depart. They survey us. They are in control. In my opinion, they are leaders. It is given. In mathematics, it is an axiom. Now, when we say female leadership, we need to do this because, as the first speaker said, we are in an abnormal social milieu where patriarchy has taken over. And we've been talking about this now for 65 years since Ruth Mompati and other people who, women of note who participated in the 1956 march, have been talking about this. But they didn't just talk, they walked the talk. They did. They did not sacrifice their agency. They took up arms in whatever fashion, and they worked, and they did. They did more than they said. Now, if we could go to the second slide, please, which begins with an African proverb that I took from Chinua Achebe's interview. Until the lions have their own historians, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. Until we take charge as women and stop pointing fingers at external agencies, the agency will always write our story. Now we need to write our own story. And this is our story tonight. If we could pause for a moment and respond to those questions, either silently or if somebody wants to interrupt me and respond, that's okay. Now, let all of us think, if you indulge me, think about who our heroes are. Who is your hero? Okay, you've identified that hero. Why is that person a hero to you? Okay, who are your top 2 role models? And why those 2 women, if they are women? Why those 2 men, if they are men? Now, in your own introspection, who looks up to you? Who unreservedly respects you, and why? The question of impact. Whose life have you touched? You know, not fleetingly brushing by, touched. And how have you done that? Now, once each of us are able to answer these 4 questions, we will then understand the impact that we're making. We will then understand and embrace our role as heroes. I don't know how many of you cited your mothers as your heroes, your grandmothers, your aunts. Charity begins at home. Because usually when we think heroes, sometimes we think, I can't generalize because there's no empirical evidence to the statement I'm making, but I feel that sometimes when I ask this question in a physical interaction, the response is always so and so. Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Desmond Tutu, whoever. We hardly ever think of our mothers, despite the struggles that they overcame. We hardly ever think of them as heroes. Our top 2 role models, how about your mother? How about your grandmother? Before you move to your university lecturer, before you move to your postgraduate supervisor, wasn't your grandmother your role model? Now, as all of us here tonight, we say that there should be change, but what change have we brought to people's life? Who consider us their hero? And why do these people consider us heroes, or sheroes, as they say in African American English? How have we touched people's lives? It doesn't matter how minute the difference that you made is. The fact of the matter is, have I made a difference in someone's life? Okay, shall we go to the next slide, please? Okay. Now, we have had a bit of the stats and the status quo, the numbers. Over the years, for the past 65 years, we've been reading the numbers. Now, currently, the numbers are out of 28 ministers. We will check now with the latest reshuffling that has been done. 14 of those are women. Take 50%. 51% of the voter population, definitely 51% or more, are women. So the 50-50, in my opinion, is it justified? Is it not? I'll leave that to you to answer. 9 premiers in the country, only 2 of those are women. And of course, in my neck of the wood, they are male premiers. The one who came before and the current one. Speakers, including the Speaker of the National Assembly, 9 of us are women. Okay, all right, there's our compensation. Yeah, Premier, Speaker, compensation. Mayors, we told that the norm, the national norm is 42%. We told that in our province, we are the leading province because 50% of our mayors, who by the way ceased being councillors technically on the 2nd of August, are women. But almost 60% of the voters in this province are women. So how come mayors are 50% when the voting is more than that? Now, I have to tell a story that I am very familiar with, my own backyard, the Electoral Commission of South Africa. Currently, there are 3 women out of the 5 commissioners. There are 3 DCOs, one of them is a woman. There are 5 provincial heads, 5 of them are women. When I joined the IEC 13 years ago, there was only 1 female head of province. Before that, there was another, but when this new one came, the Limpopo PEO came, the Gauteng PEO had long gone. So basically, when I joined the IEC 13 years ago, there was only 1 woman PEO, and I became the 2nd provincial head. Today, as we speak, in 13 years, there are 5 women. Okay, let's move to the next slide. We're going to increase our pace now. All right. Now, before I, okay, that's fine. Those are our commissioners. Okay, next slide, please. As you can see, 3 women, 1 of them a judge. Okay, and let's go to the next slide. Okay, let's go to the next slide after this. This is the one deputy CEO that I referred to. This is the woman who currently leads KwaZulu-Natal, a very complex, complicated province when it comes to elections. Next, please. And this is the woman who leads the Eastern Cape. Vast, impoverished, not easy to manage geographically province. Okay, next slide, please. And this is the beautiful woman who has just joined the IEC about 3 months ago, Ms. Gugulanga, who is now the first, she is the first female head of elections in Mpumalanga. Next slide, please. And this is the woman that I found at the IEC, the head of Limpopo. Next slide, please. And of course, yours truly. Okay, now in my own backyard, after being with the commission for 13 years, was there any impact at all in this picture? Let's go to the next slide, please, to check if that is the case. Currently in the Northwest Province, there are 10, oh, sorry, that's the senior manager, corporate services. This is the woman who decides whether or not I get paid. And this is our chief communication officer. Some of you who attend our summit might have seen Mekate. This is Mebonolo Hopane. And I'm very proud to say that she hails from my hometown. I've got nothing to do with her appointment, of course. And let's go to Meg Kate now, the Chief Communications Officer, the woman that you see on television almost every day or every time that there's something said about the IEC. I like the picture on the right because this is when she was addressing our last summit in 2019 before the COVID restrictions. And you can tell that she is making the point that she is making with emphasis. By the way, she was talking about Memogolo Semane Molutlegi. Let's go to, God bless her soul, where she is. The next slide. Now, this is our province. This is the Northwest. 10 managers. Now we start counting 9 managers, excluding the provincial head. 9 managers. Let's start counting how many women are in the leadership and management of this province. Kim Kreisfelder, Electoral Matters. Next, please. Abue Mitswamire, in charge of our finance and assets. Theodora Nobatana, in charge of a very complex, complicated, politically challenging region. Dr. Ruth Sohomutsi Mumpati. Next, please. This is Maureen Matamela. She's head of outreach in the province, and she's responsible for all communication and outreach services. I hope you're counting. Next, please. And this is Audrey Mukhatusi. Mrs. Mukhatusi is responsible for the largest of our 4 regions, Bujanala. Next, please. Okay, now, out of 9 managers, excluding the provincial head, in the Northwest Province, 6 of the 9 are women. 6 of the 9 are women. Currently, we do not have a second in command, but the person who left, who was second in command in the province, was a woman. She has moved to Gauteng. Now, this is the story of the IEC, particularly in the Northwest Province, with regards to leadership and impact. The BMF is 45 years old, just 20 years shy of the Women's March. Now, there were 13 presidents of the BMF. The BMF, according to the information that was given, is responsible for champions socio-economic transformation, champions that, social. It's a non-racial organization that champions socio-economic transformation. This is not my story, so I will leave this to the BMF. What I know for certain is that over 45 years, the BMF has had 13 presidents. Only one. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, now what is it that I am trying to remind us about today by telling the tale that I've told of the IEC, particularly in this province? What exactly do we mean by women or female leadership? Now, if we have an example like 1 out of 13, do the numbers count? And if they do count, why? Does gender actually matter in matters of socio-political, socio-economic empowerment and advancement? And if gender does matter, why? Now, if we are yearning for changes, what approach, what overall philosophy are we going to apply to the changes that we envisage to correct what might not be right? I can tell you straight away that in my approach, it has to be revolutionary because it is a matter of agency. It has to be anchored on recognition, particularly of talent. It has to be anchored on complementary approach to the changes. Now, what tools are necessary for change? What is it that will assist us to effect the changes? Because we cannot expect somebody else to effect the changes for us. We cannot shirk our responsibility as agents. I used to teach sociolinguistics, and I always said, during the apartheid era, when crime by police officers was reported, it was usually 10 striking students were killed. Agency removed. It never was the police shot and killed 10 University of Zululand students or University of. Now, in my opinion, if we need to bring about change, first we have to reclaim agency. We cannot expect anybody else to make us happy. We have to be in charge of that happiness ourselves. Now, when we say there's impact, how do we determine impact? Is it by numbers only? Is it by the quality of delivery? What exactly do we mean by impact? There isn't anything, in my opinion, that surpasses serious education. Education, not an acquisition of degrees. Not literacy in the narrow sense of the Western concept of literacy. Intelligent as can be, she was as educated as anybody can be. But mass formal education went up to standard 4 or grade 6. Now, what is it exactly that we mean by education? You know, when you are thoroughly, seriously educated, when your horizons are wide, when you have experience of a traditional community, usually referred to in this country in a superior manner as rural. Okay, I don't subscribe to that concept. It's a social construct that I don't like, because when I look at a village called Tabanchu, and I look at those beautiful schools and the hospital that used to train nurses of quality, and the college where 2 of my brothers went, how can I refer to Tabanchu as rural? How can I refer to Taung as rural? In a manner and concept that is usually used by people in poor rural areas. Not Taung, where we used to harvest barley and cotton. Of course, a lot has changed now. Cotton fields are now used to build houses. Houses are fine, but you know, are we going to eat them? Maybe not. So when I say education, I mean exactly that. Of course, literacy is important. Of course, it is important for me to have read for a degree or 2 or 3 or 4. But what have I learned in reading those degrees? What difference am I making thanks to the degrees that I acquired? Okay, next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, now, matters that we're raising tonight. We have to go through the test, the 65-year-old test, the 45-year-old test, the 27-year-old test, so that we can testify. And those testimonies that we make must be based on the fire on which we have worked. These are the words of Iyanla Van Zaan. She says, you cannot testify, you cannot provide a testimony without a test. There's no testimony without a test. When you tell your story of hardship and conquering and victory, it must be because you have gone through the biblical shadow. And once you have that, you are able to testify that this is possible. Now, my favorite filmmaker, Tyler Perry, I'm not much of a a movie fan, except for movies about my people and their growth, their struggles that lead to victory. Now, in one of Tyler Perry's movies called Daddy's Little Girls, this one person says, a male person says to a very successful corporate lawyer, "Oh, so you are trying to fit in your father's shoes." And this woman says, "No, I'm actually training myself to walk in my stilettos." It's okay to have a male role model, but your successes cannot be attributed to the male outside the male of the female. We have to create our own strides. We have to earn our own stripes. Now, I have written there, Advocate Dineo M. I didn't want to write a surname because I didn't ask for permission. But what she told me one day was that they were in a brand new board. And as usual, they were preparing to choose a chairman. And when I say chairman, I don't mean a male person, I mean a person who mans the chair. Advocate, it was silent for about 3 minutes or so. So Advocate DM then says, "You know what? I honestly do not know a single one of you here, but let me tell you this, I know what I'm capable of. I know that I deserve to be here. I have read the right letters, I have the required experience, and I have the willingness to steer this board to where it's supposed to be. So I'm going to be chairman." How many of us can do that? Because one, we're going to fear being called, what is the gross way of assertive? Arrogant. We are afraid that if we are female, that cannot be. We need to put the stripes on because you earn a stripe. When you are a constable, you are yearning to be a sergeant. So you have to earn your stripe. Now, even with the military, for the police service, you want to be a colonel. You want to rise from being just an ordinary captain to being a colonel. You want to move to being a brigadier. You want to move to being a general. So the strides that we make, those footsteps in Tyler Perry's stiletto make towards earning the stripes that Advocate DM earned, we have to be proud of, and we have to take, we have to assume, we have to get hold of. It is very important for us that we affirm ourselves as inherent leaders. We're not in competition with anybody. I mean, I can't compete with a person who's not my match. By the way, I'm not saying that men are not our match, right? They are our match. But this is not about contrasting and confirming that we are capable. Now, as we do this, we look at the codes of note. It is not, according to Tyler Perry again, it is not what you are called. Arrogant, too self-assured, brushy. It is not what you are called, but what you answer to. If my name is Dumelontle and somebody else says, well, I prefer Mildred because Dumelontle is a tongue twister. Sorry, right now, at this stage of my life, I prefer to be called by my first name, Dumelontle. And I will only answer to Dumelontle. I will not answer to Mildred. Much as I love this beautiful name of my aunt that I was given at baptism, my identity is Dumelontle because that name carries a lot about who I am and who I should be. Now, Ian Lavanza says, you know, we need to seize opportunities. We need to make sure that we look for opportunities and seize them. But my favorite Professor Diale Rangaka, who is now a very successful winemaker, says, Tiba, if there are no opportunities, create them. Create them. And this is what Meghan Markle said. Don't wait to be invited to a male table. Set your own table. Bring your own cutlery. Bring your own crockery. Don't expect somebody to do it for you when you are so in charge and you can do it all. Female. You know, the fee and the male together means I must be capable of what the last two syllables of that word, female, signify. I must be capable. That is why I shouldn't be in competition. Women, you know, I must be capable. I'm in no competition because I believe I am capable. Next slide, please. Is that the last of our slides? Oh no, there's a parting shot. Okay. Now, finally, what is it that I'd like for us to take from this presentation? Those red shoes worn by our manager finance and assets says, I'm not following in anybody's footsteps or trying to fill the two electoral heads who came, provincial heads who came before me. I am going to walk in my own stilettos. And those stilettos are going to be noticeable. I'm going to contrast them with a very beautiful black dress and a well-coordinated, symmetric, monochrome jacket to show that, like the BMF, I'm non-racial, but I am going to be fire. I am going to light my steps in the stilettos that I'm wearing. Now we need to rise up and hit the call that says, dress up and show up. You might have noticed that the pictures that I showed you of the 6 out of 9 managers in my province in particular are women who are dressed for the occasion. Let's dress up and show up. In my opinion, call me old-fashioned, but in my opinion, once I'm a teacher by profession and I go to school every day dressed in a freebie golf shirt and a baseball cap, and I should say to the young girls that I'm grooming to be successful women, that this is what you do. You become sloppy when you go to your work. Because as they say in Afrikaans, fear mag nie sterre nie. I'm sorry, fear mag sterre. Now, dress up and show up. Respect the decorum. Respect people's invitation. I'm a liberated woman, but when I go to Khanyesa for a funeral, I wear a hat because for 2 hours in my mother's St. Peter's Anglican Church, I will be wearing that hat. I just make sure that the hat is dramatic. Now, all of us are a story waiting to be told. All of us. So I'm sorry about the noise. That's my granddaughter making a statement. All of us are a story waiting to be told. So who does the telling? We do. We're not a story waiting to be heard, told by somebody else. We are a story waiting to be told. And therefore, we should take charge and tell our stories, because unless the lions have historians, the hunt will always glorify the hunter, and the show starts now. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Yeah, Dr. Tiba, and interestingly, I am currently in Taung, and yes, a lot has changed. What a beautiful, beautiful presentations. You have alluded the impact of female leadership, the participation of women. You know, as women, we need to take charge. You have touched just the critical importance of increasing women leadership. We have identified our heroes, our role models, the question of impact, and you spoke of embracing them, our heroes. Indeed, women are queens, women are marvelous. And you have also highlighted the participation of women in the IEC provincially, the electoral matters, the question, does gender matter in the socio-economic issues, and also how do we determine impact? Well, thank you so much, Dr. Tiba. I'm going to hand over now to Miss Elizabeth Mukua. Miss Elizabeth Mukua, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here, a strong woman.
Thank you so much. Over to you, ma'am.
No, thank you very much. And let me pass beautiful greetings to the strong women, to the strength in the province. Wow, Dr. Tiba, I'm telling you, you were just on fire. And I think this fire, we need to continue to make sure that we activate it in all the women, especially in Northwest. You know, when you were reflecting to the situation in Taung, because at least I schooled in Taung in agriculture. That time it was called the College of Agriculture, which was named by the former President Mangope. And I know that Taung was green. Taung was smelling nice because irrigation was just all over. And if you look at the change actually dealt with the survival of a human race, of which a woman is leading that particular area, which is the food, water, and health of the children. Indeed, if a woman can allow this space to be occupied by people who do not see that we need to be responsible, I'm telling you, we are still to regret. Let me begin by saying it is quite such an honor to be part of this session and address the inaugural Madam Chair's leadership event. You know, the 1956 Women Rebellion was not a tautology nor a rhetoric, but it was an action. You know, women united beyond their race, culture, and social class to fight against the oppressive apartheid system. The question is the women of today. When we are speaking of unity of purpose, what purpose are we seeking to achieve? You know, the native were arrested that time and jailed for not carrying their dompas. But white women could just roam on the streets freely. But guess what? They united and make sure that they fought side by side for the emancipation of women and the native in general. The question is, what is it that is a wall between us within different races that is really blocking us from coming together, develop an agenda of emancipation of women beyond the race and the culture? And the question again is, what is it that we are doing? And how are we planning to ensue with our program? And when are we uniting women to deal with our current challenges? It was during the difficult period that all women of South Africa, black and white, united for an even a greater goal, the goal of liberation from all the shackles of an inhumane system, pillared on the segregation, dehumanization of African people. We still need to continue leadership with this agenda, the unity of purpose, to make sure that we change the material condition in which we find ourselves in as women. We need to be pragmatic in our approach. And I think the question that I'm dealing with is the challenges that the women find themselves faced with, especially in the positions in the political field. And I am encouraged by the spirit of Me Gertrude Mpekwa, Me Josie Mpama, Me Ruth Sokhomotsi Mumpati, and now Me Dr. Tiba and Me Mamlambo Nuka. Because it does not mean where they are, it was just a smooth sailing. I know that they have dealt with difficult challenges, but they did not despair. They were not discouraged. They made sure, like she said, let us take the bull by its horn. Our main issue here is to make sure that the Freedom Charter is realized, which is talking to the people of South Africa, especially women and children. They are free and happy. They have access to health and education and food and home. But a woman, when they are supposed to be elected or appointed at a position of a higher echelon, they are always associated with weakness. And I think this is quite an injustice. And I think, Dr. Tiba, you covered it very well, because the woman start grooming a child from the womb. The child is born, and the woman is the one 24 hours with the child, making sure that the child is growing with food and all that the child needs, including taking care of the husband, taking care of the family, and making sure that the village is also taken care of. So for women to be associated with weakness, I think it is quite an insult to us. But nobody is going to liberate us, or this liberation will not come to us in a silver platter. I think we need to be really pragmatic in ensuring that we defeat this monster of patriarchy. Political involvement of women is always marred with difficult issues and characterization. A woman is always criticized when they have to occupy a certain position, especially in politics. A woman is asked, when are you taking care of your husband? When are you taking care of your children? When are you looking if the family unit is safe? When you are involved in politics, including the fact that you have to be away from home, to make sure that you facilitate politics towards the right direction. But women, we need to really remain resilient and determined to make sure that we defeat this patriarchy and the Eurocentric view, which also continue to make sure that they teach us that women, we don't have muscles to carry out strong responsibilities, and our thinking is always limited. I don't know by who or by what. The role of a woman between politics and a mother is always put in front of us to disadvantage us to occupy positions that we have to occupy. But I always say, tell me how to treat you by the manner in which you behave. If I have never behaved in a manner that suggests weakness, I take a very serious exception, and I know that I take an offense to somebody, a woman or a man, who wants to tell me or want to show me that I am weak because I'm a woman and I have a soft voice. Because a woman is capable to manage herself, manage her affairs, manage the family, and balance with work and politics. And I think the challenge of COVID-19, which has also, outside of the triple challenges, which are now complexed also by femicide, I think women, we have also survived and thrived in this particular condition. COVID-19 is a problem, is here with us. Women are now, the responsibilities are added on. You are expected to deliver every day your reports while you are at home. And at home, you have to cook for your husband, you have to cook for kids, you have to balance all these things. And as a woman, you are not expected to fail in either one of them. And I must say, women have been doing quite well. So it is quite an unfair position that we have to be put to say that women are weak. And Dr. Tiba, you reflected very well on the quota. This is quite an embarrassment to the current dispensation, really. But I must say also, women, we have forgotten to monitor our own progress. Nobody's going to monitor the number of women that continue to climb up the ladder, except us. It is us that we must make sure that we remind them of the quotas. We must remind them of the decisions that were taken as to when is it that women will be expected to be 100% balanced with men, especially at the workplace in higher echelon. And I believe that this is quite an agenda that we need to develop a program. It should not just be a tautology of today or just speeches of today, but as three women, I want to challenge us three women. We need to gather and we need to come together, develop a deliberate program that will make sure that at least we need to start somewhere and tell ourselves as to how far should we go in pursuing the emancipation program of women. It is quite an embarrassment that even today, 2021, we as women, we are still fighting for opportunities. We are still fighting for men to allow us to speak up on issues that are of importance to us. And us as women, and I think it is quite an unfair posture and a position that we have to find ourselves in, where we are expected to build alliance with people of decision makers, and mostly it is men, so that men will tell us, no, it is your time, or you need to wait, or no, this one is not for you. And this mentality of an imposter that is always imposed on us. I think as women, we really need to really develop a program to emancipate ourselves. What do I mean about this? What is it that is to be done? I think we need to make sure that we come up with programs to build a revenue generating system that will help us women to drive our own agenda. And we need to be determined in our activism. And this deliberate program, we need to make sure that we put time frames on it. And I think we really need to avoid, women are always found in programs that are talking of free services for all. These programs of charity and so forth. I'm not saying it is wrong to be engaged in those, but we need also to be involved in programs that are also going to help and are going to help us to build a budget that will help us to drive our own program. We need to prepare ourselves as women to re-enter the seriously paid workforce. And when I mean about this, I mean positions of very high echelon. Advocate for monitoring of quota, and that particular monitoring of quota must be monitored by ourselves. Women, let us build a sisterhood program across race and culture, and let us also continue, whether men likes it or not, let us emancipate ourselves and make sure that ultimately a woman is free at all levels. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Mukua. When you ask the question, when are we uniting women to deal with the challenges? I think it hits home. We need to continue holding these engagements as women. You have touched on the challenges women face in the political space, and as well as ensuring that we defeat and fight patriarchy. I think we just go through a lot as women, but also thank you for making even the implementations to monitor our own progress and also develop programs aiming at women. I think the session is actually supposed to end at 7:30, but we are going to open a line of questions if there are any questions. So if you have any questions, just show by raising up your hand, and then we're gonna go through them. Thank you so much, Ms. Mukua, and thank you so much everyone who participated as well. Is there any question? Ms. Badile, do you want to add something?
No, madam. For now, I think mine would be to say it's a good challenge that Memgua puts to all of us. And it's also a good challenge because it also reminds us of what Ms. Hendricks was saying. How do we come to the fore and be part of the conversation instead of the conversation being about us? How do we come to the fore and create the table, like Dr. Tiba was saying, instead of saying, I want a seat at the table? I think the problem so far has been where women say, I want a seat at the table. And none of us, or very few of us, are actually saying, I'm going to set up a table next to your table, and I am going to bring my own crockery and my own utensils, so that at least whether you listen to me or you don't listen to me, but my agenda will be set forth. For now, I think you can fill the questions that are there, Mr. Kebutani, and then if there are none, I think we can then sum up.
Sorry, I don't have an icon here to raise my hand. So is it okay if I speak?
Yes, you
Oh,
can
yes,
come
yes,
in
yes,
then.
Dr. Tiba.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mukua. You know, you start by saying that we should be pragmatic in resolving what seems to be a 6-decade-long struggle. And the fact that you say pragmatic and not only tell us that it has to be pragmatic, which means it has to fit all the caps. You even tell us step number 1, in unifying women, let us generate revenue. No, you said let us create an emancipation program of our own. I mean, in my opinion, this sums up the reason for August 9 and today's interaction. Let us create our own emancipation program that we will monitor and evaluate. And I like that. In addition to that, so that we don't go cap in hand to knock on doors that where we won't get a response. Let us let us create our own revenue for driving our own agenda. I like that. And in my experience with the Poor Goat Club that we started in Mahikeng and the IEC Women Summit, I have seen that it is possible. It can be done. We will start with 70 people. We will end up with 10. The proverbial Detroit talented 10 will take us to higher heights. It is not always about the numbers. It is about the willingness to make sacrifices for a common good. And I really appreciate this. You really have spoken to us and given us answers of a 65-year-old question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tiba. Thank you. Ms. Batil, if you want to add something, you can go on, ma'am.
For now, I don't want to add much. All I wanted to say is what Dr. Tiba is speaking to speaks to my heart and the whole reason for this platform. We need to say there has been bills like Ms. Fredericks was saying, bills have been passed. There has been, government has said let there be employment equity quotas. How much more do we need? How much more do we need to fight for? Because everything is there, but like Ms. Fredericks was saying, do we need to remind people because of legislation? If it's legislation, how much more do we need? Because it does not make sense to still be crying foul. You cannot keep doing the same thing and expect a different turnout. And if Dr. Tiba says there can be the 70, but at the end of the day, the implementers will only be 10. Let us be the few that are the implementers. Nobody will see it now. Nobody will think about it now. But with time, those small steps, that person constantly being in that forum or in that meeting, reminding people that, but I see there are applications here, but how many are women? And out of those women, are we just window dressing, or are they making an impact? Because that's another thing. Unfortunately, in corporate South Africa, they window dress. There'll be a woman, but then that woman has no power. That woman will be given shares, but when it comes to decision making, that woman is struggling. Nobody wants to listen to her. We've seen it with the many corporates that are there. Your regression is at its peak. That's why Ms. Fredericks referred to is employment equity an aborted dream? Because at some point in corporate South Africa, JSE listed companies were hiring women. There were women CEOs, but now there's only one woman CEO left. Are we happy with that? Are we okay with that? And besides that, let's not talk about things somewhere and say, we want women in, but are those women ready to lead? Are they willing to make the sacrifices that are needed? Ms. Mukua spoke to the fact that, you know, in politics, women will be asked, what are you doing here? Is your husband, you know, well taken care of? While at that time you are at a conference or somewhere trying to make an input. Those are barriers that are put forward. But what do we do? And I like that everybody has said we need to make something deliberate. And I like that Dr. Tiba, you're saying the three that are here, what are we doing too? Memuku is also saying, has given us a way to say, what can we do? So, Ms. Sikebosane, for me, I think the session has achieved its mandate. For me, it has. Sometimes we need women that are in power, women that can say, this is the impact I've made, or since I was employed, or since I was voted in, this is the impact I've made. And we can measure that, because unfortunately, men will measure us with what we've done. They don't see us, but they will look at what we've done. But if we have something to say, this is what I've done, this is what I'm aiming to do, I think this session has achieved its purpose.
Definitely, Ms. Bartile. And I think if there are no questions, then you can just close the conversation by a vote of thanks. And really, as a young person, I'm going to work out here as a different, woman with a different mindset. And I'm so grateful to be a constituent of this event. Really, I really appreciate it. And I'm so grateful. You can just do a vote of thanks. And thank you very much, Ms. Bartile. Thank you to all the panelists for your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Kebotane. I would firstly like to thank Dr. Tiba for making time. We know it's a bit difficult. All of you are busy, and thank you for making the time. And the presentation that has really, it has added a lot of our thoughts. We probably even you challenge the BMF as it is, that you know what you are saying, you're for socioeconomic transformation, but what have you done? I think it has put the nuts and bolts to an age-old question: are we living what we were saying? And thank you, Memupua, for availing yourself. I know you are very busy. I know you're a woman of strength. I think the time we gave you was very limited, because if we given you more time, I'm sure we could sit here until tomorrow. There's quite a lot of stories that you can tell about how you've changed things within the Northwest. And I thank you for that. DP, Deputy President of the BMF, Ms. Tasnim Fredericks, we thank you for the time. We thank you for all the fact that we know that every time you're always, reminding corporates of what they're doing wrong, what they're doing right. And we thank you for all the time being so passionate about putting women's issues forth. Nobody can do it better. And, with the power that you're given, we are grateful that you're always putting the women agenda at the table. No, when you are there, nobody can actually forget that there has to be a woman or something about women on the table. Ms. Kebotane, thank you for...
Thanks, if I can just maybe come in for 2 seconds to interrupt
yes,
you.
Please.
Sorry, I just wanted to say to the women who, I personally stand on the shoulders of great women who came before me, and definitely people, women like Dr. Tiba, May Elizabeth this evening. The issue of why we only as a BMF, I think it's the elephant in the room that I just want to address in 2 seconds to say, it is embarrassing actually to be called out by the IEC after looking at the presentation of pictures of women in various difficult provinces, and despite those challenges, rising to leadership. And it just shows that when women are supported and are put into those positions, they lead and they succeed with support. And why is BMF only having one woman president out of 13 male presidents? It's a question that I cannot answer now. It's something that I don't want to ignore because Dr. Tiba has raised it legitimately. We are having elections this year, Dr. Tiba. So we'll see what the members, say. I know you said it's not about the numbers, but when we know that we are we're the majority as women in this country, but we are not where we should be, it is because the males that are here are not allowing. They're not giving up their seats at the table. They are guarding those chairs forever. They don't want to get up for us. So it's sometimes not a reflection, but I think there's hope in that hopelessness, because it just means we're going to try harder and we're not going to stop. So thank you for that. I think it's important that we have honest, frank, open, transparent conversations. Whether it's pleasant to hear or uncomfortable, it's fine. So thank you for that, Mayor. I really appreciated that. And I wanted to convey that to you before, we all leave to this evening. So thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks, DP, for that. It's true that, like I always say, women are there, they are there, but are they willing to be at the table? She said, let's set our own table. If nobody is willing to move at the table, set your own table. It's the biggest lesson I've learned through my leadership journey, that at times you enter. I have led with men for 5 years. As the only woman at the table. At times it's scary, at times it's easy, but sometimes set your own table. Don't wait for that table to be set for you. Don't wait for somebody to move from the seat for you. You need to set your own table by proving that you are the best there is. And being the best means nobody will contest you. With those few words, I thank everybody that logged in. I thank you, the speakers that have challenged us. I thank Mayor Mojanaga, who has been at the background, manning things and making sure that we are here. I thank the people that logged in, our members and other people that have logged in. I thank you for dedicating your time to the BMF, listening, and probably from this minute on, you will have something to walk home with and a homework to say, this is how I am going to make sure that empowerment of women happens, that leadership of women is there, and women are ahead. Thank you, Ms. Sukibasani. I think you can finish off the program.
Thank you very much for the platform.
Thank you, Memkua. Thank you. I think today you met your match. Thank you, everyone, and good night. I think Ms. Sukibazan probably she has been logged off. Thank you for your time. Good night.